The first alien ship appeared over New York City on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9:47 a.m. It was massive, stretching nearly 2 miles across, casting a shadow that plunged Manhattan into an artificial twilight. Within minutes, similar vessels materialized over London, Tokyo, Moscow, and every major city on Earth. The ships hung there, silent and menacing, their dark hulls reflecting no light, as if they were holes cut into the sky itself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dr. Sarah Chen was having her morning coffee in her laboratory at MIT when the emergency broadcast interrupted every television and radio signal on the planet. She watched in stunned silence as the alien vessels simply appeared, materializing out of thin air without any warning from radar or satellite systems. The ships had somehow bypassed every detection system humanity had developed, arriving like ghosts made manifest. The world held its breath for exactly 17 minutes. Then the killing began. The aliens didn't bother with diplomacy. They didn't send messages or demand surrender. They simply began systematically destroying everything that could threaten them. Military installations vanished in beams of superheated plasma. Nuclear submarines were vaporized before they could surface. Fighter jets exploded in midair as invisible weapons tore them apart at the molecular level. The aliens weren't just attacking. They were erasing humanity's ability to fight back. General Marcus Thompson stood in the Pentagon's Crisis Command Center, watching helplessly as red indicators blinked out across the global defense network. Each disappearing light represented thousands of soldiers, sailors, and airmen who had vanished without even seeing their enemy. The aliens were methodical, precise, and utterly ruthless in their efficiency. They struck every military base, every weapons facility, every government installation with surgical precision. Dr. Chen had been evacuated to the underground bunker beneath Cambridge when the first wave of attacks hit Boston. The city's harbor erupted in massive explosions as alien weapons found and destroyed every naval vessel within 100 miles. From her position 3 stories underground, she could feel the earth shaking as the creatures above systematically dismantled civilization's defensive capabilities. The bunker's communication equipment crackled with desperate reports from around the world. Moscow was burning. The Kremlin had been reduced to a crater of molten glass. Beijing's government district had simply vanished, leaving behind only a perfectly circular hole in the ground. Paris, Berlin, Rome, every capital city was under attack simultaneously. The aliens had studied humanity carefully before revealing themselves, and they knew exactly where to strike to paralyze human resistance. President Elizabeth Foster had been rushed to the secure bunker beneath the White House within minutes of the first ship's appearance. The underground command center buzzed with activity as staff members tried to coordinate a response that seemed increasingly futile. Every attempt to communicate with the aliens went unanswered. Every weapons system that targeted the ships was destroyed before it could fire. The invaders demonstrated a level of technological superiority that made human resistance appear laughably primitive. Colonel James Mitchell commanded the 82nd Airborne Division, and he had never felt more helpless in his 30-year military career. His paratroopers were trained to fight any enemy, but how could they engage an opponent that struck from orbit with weapons that defied understanding? The alien ships released no heat signature, produced no electromagnetic emissions, and seemed to exist in a state that made them impossible to target with conventional weapons. They were fighting ghosts that could kill with perfect accuracy. The first day's casualty reports were staggering. Every major military installation in North America had been destroyed. The Pentagon was gone, replaced by a smoking crater. NORAD's mountain fortress had been carved open like a tin can. Naval bases from Norfolk to San Diego were underwater ruins. The aliens had crippled America's military might in less than 12 hours, and similar devastation was occurring across every continent. Dr. Chen's colleague, Professor David Kim, had been monitoring the attacks from the bunker's sophisticated sensor array. His analysis revealed a disturbing pattern in the alien assault. The creatures weren't just destroying military targets. They were eliminating specific types of technology. Every advanced research facility, every particle accelerator, every space program installation had been priority targets. The aliens were systematically removing humanity's most sophisticated scientific capabilities. The second day brought a shift in the invasion strategy. Having eliminated organized military resistance, the aliens began targeting civilian infrastructure. Power grids collapsed as orbital weapons severed transmission lines. Water treatment facilities exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Transportation networks were severed as bridges, tunnels, and airports became smoldering ruins. The invaders were methodically destroying the foundations of modern civilization. Emma Rodriguez had been working as a nurse in downtown Chicago when the attacks began. The hospital where she worked had been evacuated to underground emergency shelters, but the building above had been reduced to rubble by alien weapons. She moved through the crowded basement corridors, treating injuries and trying to comfort terrified patients, while the city she had known her entire life was systematically demolished overhead. The aliens struck with a precision that suggested they had studied human society for years before beginning their assault. The world's communication networks were collapsing under the coordinated attack. Satellite constellations were destroyed by weapons that seemed to fire from empty space. Cellular towers crumbled as invisible forces tore them apart. Internet cables were severed by energy beams that struck with impossible accuracy. The aliens were isolating human populations, cutting them off from each other and from any hope of coordinated resistance. President Foster's advisors presented her with increasingly desperate options. Nuclear weapons were useless against targets that couldn't be detected or tracked. Conventional military forces had been decimated before they could engage. The National Guard was scattered and overwhelmed. Every technological advantage that humanity had developed over centuries of warfare had been neutralized in a matter of hours. The aliens had reduced Earth's most advanced military powers to the level of primitive tribes throwing stones at armored vehicles. Dr. Chen received reports from colleagues around the world who had survived the initial attacks. The pattern was consistent across every continent. The aliens demonstrated perfect knowledge of human technology, striking at vulnerabilities that defensive planners had never even considered. They disabled weapon systems by targeting components that weren't supposed to be critical. They destroyed communication networks by severing connections that were thought to be redundant. The invaders understood human technology better than the humans who had built it. The refugee crisis began on the second day, as millions of people fled from the cities under attack. Highways became rivers of humanity as families abandoned their homes and possessions, seeking safety in rural areas that might be beyond the aliens' immediate interest. But the creatures' weapons had global reach, and nowhere on Earth seemed truly safe from their methodical destruction of human civilization. Colonel Mitchell found himself commanding a mixed group of survivors from various military units. His soldiers had been scattered when their base was destroyed, and they were now operating from a network of caves in the Appalachian Mountains. The men and women under his command were skilled fighters, but they were reduced to hiding in holes while an enemy they couldn't see or understand demolished everything they had sworn to protect. The frustration was eating away at morale faster than any direct attack could have managed. The third day brought the most terrifying development yet. The aliens began abducting humans. Their ships would descend over populated areas and emit a strange, pulsing light that seemed to pass through solid matter. People caught in the light would simply vanish, leaving behind only empty clothes and the echo of their screams. The aliens were taking specimens, studying their enemy even as they destroyed human civilization. Dr. Kim's analysis of the abduction patterns revealed another disturbing truth. The aliens weren't selecting humans at random. They were specifically targeting individuals with advanced technical knowledge, military training, or leadership experience. Scientists, engineers, military officers, and government officials were disappearing at a rate far higher than the general population. The invaders were systematically removing the people who might be capable of organizing effective resistance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emma Rodriguez watched in horror as the lights descended over her shelter. She saw colleagues and patients vanish in the alien beams, their bodies dissolving into streams of light that flowed upward toward the waiting ships. The creatures weren't just destroying human civilization, they were harvesting its most valuable components. The thought that she might be next filled her with a terror that was almost paralyzing. The world's intelligence agencies, or what remained of them, began piecing together fragments of information about the invaders. The aliens had been observing Earth for decades, possibly centuries. Satellite imagery analysis revealed subtle signs of their presence that had been dismissed as equipment malfunctions or atmospheric anomalies. UFO sightings that had been ridiculed by mainstream science now appeared to be evidence of a long-term surveillance operation. The aliens had been studying humanity with the patience of scientists observing laboratory specimens. President Foster faced the most difficult decision of her career. With conventional military resistance proving futile, some advisors were suggesting that humanity should attempt to negotiate surrender terms. The aliens had demonstrated their complete technological superiority, and continued resistance would only result in more destruction and death. But the abductions made it clear that the invaders viewed humans as resources to be harvested rather than as intelligent beings worthy of mercy. Dr. Chen worked frantically with the surviving members of her research team to understand the alien technology. The weapons systems demonstrated capabilities that seemed to violate known laws of physics. Energy beams that appeared from nowhere suggested mastery of dimensional manipulation. The ship's ability to materialize without warning indicated control over space-time itself. Humanity was facing an enemy whose science had advanced far beyond anything terrestrial civilization had achieved. The psychological impact of the invasion was as devastating as the physical destruction. Humanity had always imagined itself as the dominant species, the masters of their planet and potentially their galaxy. The aliens had shattered that illusion in less than 72 hours. Earth's most advanced technology had proven as ineffective as Bronze Age weapons against their orbital fortresses. The species that had split the atom and landed on the moon had been reduced to cowering in underground shelters while their cities burned above. Colonel Mitchell's intelligence officers brought him reports that defied belief. The aliens weren't just attacking Earth, they were transforming it. Atmospheric processors were being deployed over major population centers, slowly altering the composition of the air itself. The creatures were terraforming the planet, making it more suitable for their own biology, while rendering it gradually uninhabitable for humans. The invasion wasn't just a conquest, it was a complete ecological replacement. The communication networks that had survived the initial attacks carried increasingly desperate messages from around the world. Governments had collapsed or gone into hiding. Military organizations had been shattered. Scientific institutions had been specifically targeted for destruction. The aliens had systematically eliminated every aspect of human civilization that might have posed even a theoretical threat to their dominance. Dr. Kim discovered something that chilled him to the bone. Analysis of the alien attack patterns revealed that the invaders possessed detailed knowledge of humanity's most classified military projects. They had targeted secret installations that weren't supposed to exist, destroyed weapons systems that were still in development, and eliminated research programs that had been hidden from all but the highest levels of government. The aliens had been gathering intelligence on human capabilities for far longer than anyone had suspected. Emma Rodriguez found herself part of a growing underground resistance movement. Ordinary citizens were organizing into small groups, sharing resources and information while avoiding the alien patrols that now moved through the ruins of major cities. The creatures had deployed ground forces that resembled mechanical spiders, each one equipped with sensors that could detect human life signs from miles away. Survival required constant movement and perfect concealment. The financial and economic systems of the world had collapsed completely. Stock markets had closed when their computer systems were destroyed. Banks had lost all their electronic records when alien weapons targeted data centers. Currency had become meaningless when the governments that backed it had been eliminated. The aliens had reduced human civilization to a barter economy based on food, water, and ammunition. President Foster's cabinet met in an underground bunker that had been carved from solid rock during the Cold War. The room was filled with military leaders, intelligence officials, and civilian advisors who looked exhausted and defeated. Every report they received brought news of fresh disasters. The aliens controlled the skies, the seas, and increasingly, the land itself. Humanity was being systematically exterminated with the efficiency of an industrial process. Dr. Chen made a discovery that changed everything. While analyzing fragments of alien technology that had been recovered from destroyed ships, she found evidence that the invaders weren't as invincible as they appeared. The creatures' weapons systems generated specific electromagnetic signatures that could be detected and analyzed. More importantly, they seemed to be built using principles that, while far advanced, were not entirely beyond human comprehension. The third day ended with a sobering realization. The aliens had accomplished in 72 hours what no human military force had ever achieved. They had conquered the entire planet, eliminated organized resistance, and begun the process of transforming Earth into something suited to their own needs. Humanity's technological civilization had been reduced to scattered groups of survivors hiding in underground shelters and remote wilderness areas. But Dr. Chen's analysis suggested that the invasion might not be the end of human civilization. The aliens had made one crucial mistake in their campaign of conquest. They had assumed that the technology they had observed during their surveillance represented the full extent of human capabilities. They had studied humanity's public achievements, their military forces, and their scientific institutions. But they had not discovered the secrets that certain groups had been developing in absolute secrecy for decades. The real question was whether these hidden capabilities could be deployed effectively against an enemy that had already demonstrated complete technological superiority. The aliens had conquered Earth in 3 days, but they had done so by fighting the humanity they thought they knew. The next phase of the conflict would determine whether the species they had underestimated could survive their own apparent defeat. General Thompson looked at the reports flooding in from around the world and felt a grim satisfaction. The aliens had won the opening phase of the war, but they had also revealed their strategies, their capabilities, and their weaknesses. The invasion had been a masterpiece of tactical execution, but it had also been an intelligence-gathering operation for the humans who had survived. The creatures had shown their hand, and now it was time to discover what cards humanity had been keeping hidden. The first 3 days of the invasion had ended with humanity's conventional military forces destroyed, their governments scattered, and their cities in ruins. But the real war was just beginning. The aliens had conquered the Earth they could see, but they were about to discover that human civilization had layers that their surveillance had never penetrated. The species that had appeared helpless was about to reveal why they had really survived every challenge their planet had thrown at them. Dr. Chen closed her analysis report and looked around the bunker at her surviving colleagues. The data was clear. The aliens had superior technology, perfect tactical planning, and overwhelming firepower. But they had also made assumptions about human nature that might prove to be fatal errors. They had conquered a planet, but they had not yet faced the species that had created that civilization. The invasion had lasted 3 days, but the war was about to begin in earnest. The scattered survivors of humanity's military forces received coded messages through communication networks that the aliens didn't know existed. The messages were simple, containing only coordinates and timing information. But they represented something that the invaders had not anticipated. The humans they had conquered were not the same species that had built the civilization they had destroyed. The real humanity was about to emerge from the shadows where it had been hiding for generations. Colonel Mitchell read his orders and smiled for the first time since the invasion began. The aliens had won the first round by fighting an enemy that had never really existed. They had conquered the public face of human civilization while remaining completely unaware of the true nature of the species they had challenged. The next phase of the conflict would be fought on terms that the invaders had never imagined possible. The transformation was about to begin, but it would not be the terraforming that the aliens had planned. Humanity was about to stop being nice, and the creatures who had conquered Earth in 3 days were about to discover what their new planet's dominant species was really capable of when it stopped pretending to be weak. Dr. Vincent Hayes received the emergency transmission while hiding in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath what had once been downtown Seattle. The message came through on a frequency that shouldn't have existed, using encryption protocols that no government agency was supposed to possess. The signal bypassed every alien jamming system as if they didn't exist, reaching him through communication networks that the invaders had never detected because they had never been officially built. The coordinates led him to a service entrance hidden behind a false wall in the tunnel system. Hayes had worked for the Department of Energy for 15 years, but the security scanner that verified his identity knew details about his life that no government database had ever recorded. The elevator that carried him downward traveled for nearly 3 minutes, descending far deeper than any public blueprint of Seattle had ever indicated. Director Catherine Walsh waited for him in a conference room that existed 800 feet beneath the city. The facility around them hummed with activity that seemed impossible given the destruction above. Technicians moved between workstations that displayed information about alien ship movements, weapon signatures, and tactical patterns. The equipment they used bore no resemblance to anything Hayes had seen in his years of government service, and the data they were collecting was far more detailed than anything the official military had managed to gather. Walsh had aged considerably since Hayes had last seen her at a scientific conference 2 years earlier. Her hair had gone completely gray, and there were lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. She gestured for him to sit at a table where several other familiar faces were already waiting. Dr. Angela Foster from CERN, Professor Michael Chen from Stanford, Dr. Robert Kim from MIT, and half a dozen other scientists whose work Hayes respected were studying displays that showed the complete alien invasion from angles that should not have been possible. The truth that Walsh revealed would have seemed like science fiction just days earlier. The United States government, along with several allied nations, had been developing advanced technology in absolute secrecy for over 60 years. The programs had begun during the Cold War as contingency plans against nuclear annihilation, but they had evolved into something far more comprehensive. Hidden facilities buried beneath major cities, concealed research installations in remote locations, and classified projects that operated with funding that appeared nowhere in any official budget. Dr. Foster activated a holographic display that showed alien ships in perfect detail. The images had been captured by reconnaissance systems that existed in a parallel layer of reality, invisible to both alien sensors and conventional human technology. The ships that had appeared invincible to Earth's official military forces were revealed to have structural weaknesses, power distribution patterns, and defensive vulnerabilities that could be exploited by weapons the aliens had never seen because they had never been publicly deployed. The facility itself was a marvel of engineering that defied everything Hayes thought he knew about human capabilities. The walls were constructed from materials that absorbed energy rather than reflecting it, making the entire complex invisible to most forms of detection. The power systems operated on principles that seemed to bend the laws of physics, drawing energy from sources that conventional science insisted were impossible to harness. The computers processed information using quantum calculations that shouldn't have been achievable with terrestrial technology. Professor Chen explained the scope of the hidden programs with charts and diagrams that revealed the true extent of human scientific advancement. The technology that the public knew about represented perhaps 20% of what human civilization had actually achieved. The remaining 80% had been developed in facilities like this one, tested in environments that didn't officially exist, and perfected by researchers whose names appeared on no academic papers and whose discoveries were shared with no scientific journals. The weapon systems that defended the hidden facilities were beyond anything the aliens had encountered in their surveillance of human military capabilities. Energy barriers that could deflect attacks by redirecting them into alternate dimensions surrounded every secret installation. Defensive networks that operated through quantum entanglement allowed instantaneous communication between facilities on opposite sides of the planet. Stealth technology that made objects completely undetectable had been protecting these locations for decades without the alien scouts ever realizing they were missing crucial pieces of the puzzle. Dr. Kim presented analysis of the alien technology that revealed why the invasion had been so devastatingly effective. The creatures had studied human capabilities for approximately 40 years, but they had only observed the technology that governments were willing to deploy publicly. Their tactical planning had been based on defeating weapon systems that represented 1960s-level human engineering, while the actual state of human technology had advanced far beyond what they had prepared to counter. The aliens had made the same mistake that human intelligence agencies had been designed to prevent. They had assumed that what they could observe represented the full extent of their enemy's capabilities. Their surveillance had been thorough and sophisticated, but it had been conducted against the wrong target. They had spent decades learning how to defeat the human civilization that existed in newspapers and television broadcasts, while the real human civilization had been developing in complete secrecy just beyond their perception. Walsh opened classified files that revealed the true purpose behind decades of seemingly unrelated government programs. The space race had been cover for testing propulsion systems that operated on principles the aliens had never mastered. Nuclear weapons programs had concealed research into energy manipulation that made conventional explosives obsolete. Computer development projects had hidden advances in artificial intelligence that could process information faster than biological minds could comprehend. The personnel in the facility represented a shadow civilization that had been growing parallel to the public one for generations. Scientists who had officially died in accidents, had actually been recruited into programs that required them to disappear from conventional society. Military officers who had supposedly retired had been assigned to units that didn't appear on any organizational chart. Engineers whose innovations had been classified beyond all recognition had been building systems that the invaders had never imagined. Dr. Hayes struggled to understand the implications of what he was seeing. The technology displayed around him suggested that human science had advanced far enough to make the alien invasion not just resistible, but potentially defeatable. The weapons that had seemed unstoppable to Earth's conventional forces could be countered by systems that had been waiting in hidden bunkers for exactly this type of threat. The aliens had conquered a civilization that had been deliberately created to appear vulnerable, while concealing capabilities that could surprise even their most paranoid strategic planners. The decision facing the assembled scientists and officials was unprecedented in human history. They could maintain their concealment and allow the alien occupation to proceed, preserving their hidden civilization while the public one was destroyed. They could reveal selected capabilities and attempt to negotiate from a position of unexpected strength. Or they could deploy everything they had developed in a coordinated response that would expose the full extent of human technological advancement to galactic observation. General Patricia Stone commanded military forces that officially didn't exist. Her soldiers had trained with weapons that had never been tested publicly, and vehicles that operated using propulsion systems developed in laboratories that appeared on no government maps. The units under her command were equipped with personal armor that could deflect energy weapons, communications equipment that functioned through quantum entanglement, and weapons that could disable alien technology without destroying it completely. The strategic planning for humanity's response took place in war rooms that had been prepared for this exact scenario decades before the aliens had revealed themselves. Every detail of the invasion had been anticipated and countered by contingency plans that assumed humanity would eventually face a technologically superior enemy. The aliens had executed their conquest perfectly according to military doctrines that human strategists had been studying and preparing to defeat for 50 years. Dr. Foster presented weapon systems that could neutralize alien ships without causing the massive destruction that conventional nuclear weapons would produce. The devices operated by disrupting the exotic matter that powered alien technology, causing their systems to simply shut down rather than explode. The aliens could be defeated without destroying them, potentially allowing for post-conflict analysis that could advance human technology even further. The manufacturing capabilities hidden beneath the Earth's surface were staggering in their scope and sophistication. Automated factories buried in extinct volcanic chambers could produce advanced technology at rates that would allow human forces to match alien numbers within weeks rather than years. The production facilities had been designed to remain completely self-sufficient, capable of operating independently even if the surface world was completely destroyed. Professor Chen revealed intelligence networks that had been monitoring alien activity since the first UFO sightings of the 1940s. The data they had collected indicated that the current invasion force represented only a fraction of the alien civilization's total military capabilities. The creatures were testing human resistance before committing their main forces, which meant that defeating the current attack would likely trigger a much larger and more dangerous response. The alien abduction program was revealing critical information about the invaders' biology and technology. The humans who had been taken were being studied in facilities that the hidden monitoring systems could observe in detail. The aliens were discovering that human physiology was more adaptable than they had anticipated, and that human intelligence was capable of understanding their technology far more quickly than their models had predicted. Dr. Kim presented evidence that the aliens were not the only extraterrestrial civilization that had been observing Earth. Radio telescope arrays that had been constructed in secret had detected communications between the current invaders and at least 3 other species that were watching the conflict with interest. Humanity's response to the invasion would determine not just their relationship with their current enemies, but their standing with an entire galactic community that they had never known existed. The psychological warfare implications of revealing human capabilities were as important as the military considerations. The aliens had based their invasion strategy on the assumption that humans would respond to technological superiority with fear and submission. Demonstrating that humanity possessed capabilities that matched or exceeded alien technology would shatter their strategic planning and force them to completely reevaluate their approach to the conflict. Walsh presented the final strategic assessment to the assembled decision-makers. Humanity could continue hiding their true capabilities and attempt to survive the occupation through concealment and guerrilla warfare. They could reveal selected technologies and attempt to negotiate a settlement that preserved human independence while acknowledging alien superiority. Or they could deploy their full technological arsenal in a demonstration that would announce humanity's arrival as a major galactic power. The first option would preserve human civilization but condemn the public population to slavery or extermination under alien rule. The second option risked exposing human capabilities without guaranteeing success, potentially resulting in a more determined alien response. The third option would transform humanity's position in the galaxy overnight, but it would also attract attention from other civilizations that might view an emerging technological power as a threat to galactic stability. General Stone outlined the military capabilities that could be deployed within hours of receiving authorization. Hidden launch facilities could deploy ships that surpassed alien technology in speed, maneuverability, and weapons systems. Orbital platforms that had been concealed for decades could provide fire support that would neutralize alien vessels before they could respond. Ground forces equipped with technology that made them functionally invisible could eliminate alien installations with precision that would minimize civilian casualties. The vote was taken in complete silence, with each participant entering their decision through quantum-encrypted terminals that ensured absolute security. The question before them was not whether humanity could defeat the aliens, but whether they should reveal the true extent of human advancement to a galaxy that had never suspected Earth was anything more than a primitive world inhabited by a species that had barely achieved interplanetary travel. Dr. Hayes cast his vote and watched as the results appeared on the central display. The decision had been unanimous. Humanity would stop hiding, stop pretending to be weak, and stop allowing other civilizations to underestimate their capabilities. The aliens had conquered the Earth they thought they knew, but they were about to discover that the planet they had invaded was home to a species that had been preparing for this conflict since before their grandparents had been born. The transformation would begin within hours. Hidden facilities around the world were receiving activation codes that would bring systems online that had been waiting in standby mode for decades. The aliens who had devastated human civilization in 3 days were about to face the civilization that had been built specifically to defeat enemies exactly like them. The invasion was about to become something that neither species had anticipated, and the galaxy was about to discover that Earth's inhabitants were far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. The activation sequence began at exactly 0300 hours Greenwich Mean Time. Across the globe, facilities that had existed in perfect concealment for decades suddenly came alive with activity that would have been impossible to hide from conventional surveillance. But the aliens weren't using conventional surveillance anymore. Their sensors were calibrated to detect the technology they had observed during their years of watching humanity, and they remained completely unaware that beneath their feet humanity was preparing to emerge from the shadows. Commander Lisa Park stood in the control center of Installation Prometheus, buried 3 miles beneath the Nevada desert. The facility around her represented 60 years of human engineering pushed beyond every theoretical limitation. Fusion reactors that operated at room temperature powered systems that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. Supercomputers that processed information using principles of consciousness itself coordinated responses across multiple dimensions of reality. The technology that surrounded her made the alien ships look like crude approximations of what advanced engineering could actually achieve. The first phase of Operation Awakening involved systems that the aliens couldn't detect because they operated outside the normal spectrum of physical reality. Quantum resonance transmitters sent activation signals to hidden installations by bypassing normal space-time entirely. Within minutes, facilities on every continent were receiving instructions that traveled faster than light through dimensions that conventional physics insisted didn't exist. The alien monitoring systems never registered the communications because they were looking for signals in the wrong universe. Dr. Rebecca Torres had spent 15 years developing the technology that would turn humanity's apparent defeat into decisive victory. The systems she had created didn't just surpass alien capabilities. They operated on principles that made alien technology fundamentally obsolete. Where the invaders used brute force to manipulate energy, human systems convinced reality itself to behave differently. The aliens controlled matter, but humans had learned to negotiate with the laws that governed matter's existence. Installation Alpha emerged from beneath Lake Superior like a mountain rising from the depths. The structure had remained hidden for 40 years under quantum camouflage that made it impossible to detect, even when observers were standing directly above it. As the facility revealed itself, water flowed around it in patterns that defied gravity, creating a barrier that would have seemed magical to any civilization that hadn't mastered the relationship between consciousness and physical law. The aliens' sensors finally detected the installation, but their analysis systems couldn't process what they were observing. Commander Yuki Tanaka piloted the first human vessel to engage alien forces using technology that the invaders had never encountered. Her ship existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making it functionally impossible to target with weapons that operated in only 3 spatial dimensions. The craft moved through space by convincing local reality that it was already where it wanted to be, achieving instantaneous travel without accelerating through the intervening distance. When alien sensors tried to track the vessel, they registered readings that indicated it was somehow moving backward through time. The aliens' response to the appearance of human technology was immediate and overwhelming. Every ship in their fleet converged on the locations where human installations were emerging from concealment. They deployed weapons that had proven capable of cracking planetary crusts, expecting to destroy these new threats before they could become operational. The energy discharges that struck the human facilities were absorbed and redirected into parallel dimensions, where they harmlessly dissipated without affecting anything in normal space-time. Dr. Martin Webb watched from his position in Installation Omega, as alien weapons fire simply ceased to exist when it encountered human defensive systems. The shields that protected the facility didn't deflect energy. They convinced the attacking forces that the target didn't exist in any meaningful sense. The aliens were firing at installations that their sensors could detect, but that reality itself refused to acknowledge as valid targets. Their weapons were devastating empty space, while the humans they were trying to destroy remained completely unaffected. The first alien ship to be disabled came as a complete shock to the invaders. Commander Tanaka's vessel approached the massive craft using movement patterns that seemed to violate causality itself. Instead of attacking the ship directly, her weapons systems reached into the alien vessel's power core and politely requested that it shut down. The exotic matter that fueled the alien technology complied with the request because human systems had addressed it using languages that existed at the quantum level of reality. The ship didn't explode or crash. It simply stopped functioning as its components decided to cease their current activities. General Marcus Stone coordinated the global response from Installation Command, a facility that existed in 17 different locations simultaneously through quantum superposition technology. His strategic planning utilized computers that calculated probabilities by examining potential futures directly, allowing him to anticipate alien responses before the invaders had finished making their decisions. The war was being fought using intelligence gathering that operated outside normal temporal constraints. The aliens attempted to adapt their tactics when their conventional weapons proved ineffective against human installations. They deployed their most advanced technology, weapons that operated by unmaking the fundamental forces that held matter together. The devices should have been capable of erasing human facilities from existence by convincing reality that they had never been built. But human defensive systems had been designed by engineers who understood existence itself as a negotiable concept, and they simply declined to be unmade. Dr. Sarah Chen emerged from Installation Pacific, riding in a vessel that demonstrated the true extent of human technological advancement. Her ship was constructed from materials that existed in a state of controlled impossibility, making it simultaneously present and absent in ways that allowed it to interact with normal matter while remaining immune to conventional physics. The craft moved through alien formations like a ghost-made solid, disabling enemy vessels by introducing them to concepts that their technology couldn't process. The psychological impact on the alien forces was devastating. They had spent decades preparing to fight an enemy whose capabilities they had studied and cataloged extensively. Instead, they found themselves confronting technology that operated according to rules they had never encountered. Their tactical planning became useless when human systems responded to attacks by rewriting the fundamental principles that made those attacks possible. The aliens were fighting an enemy that had apparently learned to edit reality itself. Commander Elena Rodriguez led the assault on the primary alien command vessel, using weapons that the invaders couldn't understand because they operated outside the normal relationship between cause and effect. Her targeting systems identified alien weaknesses by examining the intentions behind their technology rather than the physical structures themselves. When her weapons fired, they struck at the concepts that allowed alien systems to function, causing technology to fail not because it was damaged, but because it could no longer remember how to work. The alien abduction facilities that had been processing human specimens suddenly found their operations disrupted by rescue missions that seemed to violate every law of physics. Human soldiers appeared inside sealed alien chambers without passing through the walls, removed captive humans by convincing local space-time that the captives were actually somewhere else, and departed through exits that opened into dimensions the aliens couldn't detect. The rescued humans reported that their rescuers had seemed to move through alien technology like it was made of insubstantial mist. Dr. Jennifer Liu analyzed alien communications from her position in Installation Neural, where human consciousness amplification technology allowed her to process information at speeds that made quantum computers seem slow. The aliens were broadcasting increasingly desperate messages to their home worlds, describing human capabilities that their command structure refused to believe. The invaders were trying to explain that their enemies had technology that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute constraints. The aliens' terraforming equipment began malfunctioning when human countermeasures reached the atmospheric processors scattered across Earth's surface. Instead of directly attacking the alien machinery, human systems introduced the terraforming equipment to alternative perspectives on what atmospheric composition should optimally include. The alien machines decided that Earth's original atmosphere was actually preferable to the modifications they had been programmed to implement, and they began reversing their own work. General Patricia Wells commanded human forces that moved through battlespace, using tactical principles that incorporated nonlinear time flow. Her soldiers could attack alien positions before the invaders had finished deciding to defend them, using weapons that fired retroactively to ensure that alien defenses failed before they were erected. The aliens found themselves losing battles that hadn't started yet, defeated by enemies who had somehow convinced causality to operate in reverse. The massive alien city ships that had been preparing to land and establish permanent occupation centers encountered interference that defied their understanding of how matter behaved. Human systems reached into the ship's fundamental structures and introduced them to architectural concepts that incorporated impossible geometries. The alien vessels found their internal spaces becoming larger than their external dimensions, their corridors leading to destinations that couldn't coexist with their departure points, and their computer systems processing data that indicated they were simultaneously in multiple conflicting locations. Dr. Kevin Park discovered that the aliens' biological systems were vulnerable to human technology that operated at the interface between consciousness and physical existence. The invaders' mental processes were disrupted when human systems introduced them to ideas that their neurological architecture couldn't contain. Alien commanders found themselves unable to maintain coherent thought patterns when human weapons convinced their brains that logic itself was an optional feature of reality. The final phase of the human response involved weapons that the aliens couldn't recognize as weapons because they operated by offering rather than imposing. Human systems approached alien technology with proposals for alternative ways of existing that were so appealing that the alien machines voluntarily shut down their aggressive functions. Instead of being destroyed, the alien systems were converted to human purposes by being shown more interesting ways to fulfill their original programming. Commander Tanaka's final assault on the alien command structure demonstrated the true scope of human advancement. Her ship approached the enemy flagship by traveling through the spaces between thoughts, emerging inside the alien command center through doorways that existed only in the realm of pure possibility. The alien commanders found themselves facing a human officer who existed in their secure facility despite never having entered it, speaking to them using communication methods that bypassed their universal translators by addressing their consciousness directly. The surrender negotiations took place in a conference room that existed simultaneously on the alien flagship and in Installation Command, with participants from both locations occupying the same space without being in the same dimension. The alien commanders discovered that human technology allowed for diplomatic exchanges that could occur across impossible distances and through barriers that conventional communication couldn't penetrate. They were negotiating with representatives who were somehow present in their most secure facilities while simultaneously remaining safely protected in human installations. Dr. Torres presented the terms of human victory to alien leaders who struggled to understand how they had been defeated so completely. The aliens had controlled Earth's surface for 3 days, but they had never discovered the civilization that actually controlled the planet. Human technology had allowed their enemies to hide entire continents of advanced development beneath layers of reality that alien sensors couldn't penetrate. The invaders had conquered a facade while the real human civilization had been watching from dimensions they didn't know existed. The transformation of Earth began with the systematic shutdown of alien occupation systems. Human technology convinced the invaders' equipment that its original mission had been completed successfully, causing the terraforming apparatus to deactivate itself voluntarily. The alien city ships began departing Earth orbit, not because they were being forced to leave, but because human systems had persuaded them that they would be happier exploring empty space where they wouldn't have to interact with reality-manipulating technology. General Stone supervised the establishment of new defensive networks that would ensure no future invasion could threaten Earth using conventional approaches. The planet was surrounded by monitoring stations that existed in quantum superposition, making them simultaneously present in every possible attack vector that enemies might use to approach the solar system. Any hostile force attempting to reach Earth would find themselves detected and analyzed long before they realized they were being observed. The alien prisoners were treated with care that shocked their own leadership. Human detention facilities existed in pocket dimensions where time flowed at different rates, allowing the invaders to experience months of comfortable confinement while only minutes passed in normal space-time. The aliens discovered that human technology could provide living conditions that were actually superior to what they had experienced on their own ships, leading many of them to request extended stays in human custody. Dr. Chen began the process of analyzing alien technology using human systems that could understand the invaders' science by experiencing it from the perspective of the electrons that powered their equipment. The insights gained from this analysis would advance human technology even further, incorporating alien innovations into systems that were already operating beyond what the invaders had believed possible. The failed invasion was becoming a catalyst for human advancement that would accelerate their development by centuries. The galactic community's response to humanity's emergence was monitored by communication arrays that could detect transmissions across interstellar distances by convincing space itself to compress temporarily. The revelations about human capabilities were causing panic among civilizations that had dismissed Earth as an insignificant backwater. Species that had been planning their own invasions were rapidly reconsidering their strategic assessments in light of humanity's demonstration. Commander Rodriguez established the first human embassy to operate in normal space, using technology that made the facility simultaneously accessible to conventional alien visitors and perfectly integrated with Earth's dimensional manipulation infrastructure. The building existed in 17 different architectural styles simultaneously, allowing visitors from various species to experience it as conforming to their own cultural expectations, while human staff operated it according to principles that incorporated impossible engineering. The economic implications of revealing human technology were staggering. The industrial systems hidden beneath Earth's surface could produce materials and devices that would revolutionize galactic commerce. Human manufacturing techniques that operated by convincing matter to assemble itself into desired configurations would make conventional production methods obsolete across the galaxy. The species that had attempted to conquer Earth was about to discover that they had attacked the galaxy's most advanced manufacturing civilization. Dr. Liu established diplomatic contact with alien governments using communication systems that operated by sharing conceptual frameworks directly between consciousness systems. The psychological barriers that had made interspecies communication difficult were bypassed by technology that allowed humans and aliens to experience each other's thought patterns directly. The resulting understanding eliminated most of the cultural misunderstandings that had led to the invasion attempt. The terraforming damage to Earth's environment was reversed, using restoration technology that operated by asking damaged ecosystems what they would prefer to become. Polluted areas were offered choices about how to clean themselves, and they invariably selected environmental configurations that exceeded their original pristine conditions. Within weeks, Earth's biosphere was healthier than it had been before human civilization had begun affecting it. General Wells commanded the first human vessels to venture beyond the solar system, using propulsion technology that traveled by convincing distant destinations that they were actually local. The exploration missions that followed would establish humanity's presence in galactic space, using methods that other civilizations would spend centuries trying to understand. The species that had hidden behind illusions of primitive development was about to become the galaxy's most influential exploratory force. The aliens who remained on Earth as voluntary guests discovered that human society operated according to principles that made their own civilizations seem unnecessarily restrictive. The integration technology that allowed different species to coexist in the same communities operated by finding common ground that existed in dimensions that no single species could access alone. The failed invaders were becoming willing immigrants to a world that offered social and technological possibilities their own cultures had never imagined. The final message to the galactic community was broadcast using transmission methods that reached every inhabited world simultaneously by bypassing the normal limitations of signal propagation. The communication announced humanity's intention to participate in galactic affairs as equals, offering technological assistance to any civilization that approached them peacefully, while promising decisive response to any future threats. The galaxy learned that Earth was no longer a primitive world to be exploited, but a technological powerhouse that could reshape interstellar civilization. Dr. Park established research partnerships with alien scientists using collaboration technology that allowed researchers from different species to share knowledge by temporarily merging their consciousness systems. The resulting innovations would advance the science of every participating civilization, creating a new age of discovery that operated according to principles no single species could have developed alone. The invasion that had threatened to destroy human civilization had become the catalyst for the greatest advancement in galactic history. The transformation was complete. Humanity had stopped pretending to be weak, stopped hiding their true capabilities, and stopped allowing other civilizations to underestimate what Earth's inhabitants could accomplish. The invasion had lasted 3 days. But the war that followed had redefined the balance of power across the galaxy. The aliens had conquered a planet, but they had awakened a civilization that would reshape the universe according to principles that made conventional physics seem quaint and limited. The species that had attempted to subjugate humanity discovered that they had challenged the one civilization in the galaxy that had mastered the relationship between consciousness and reality itself. Earth's defenders hadn't just repelled an invasion. They had demonstrated that human technology operated at levels that made every other civilization's science appear primitive by comparison. The galaxy would never again make the mistake of assuming that any species was truly powerless, and humanity would never again need to hide the true extent of their extraordinary capabilities. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.